There's two aspects of when we study and we learn Torah. There is the external part of it, what we call the guf, which is the part that is easy to see, easy to appreciate, very practical and very tangible. And then there's a deeper level, what he calls the neshama. It's the soul of the mitzvah, the soul of the pasuk and what the Torah is trying to say. It's something that's not easily seen. It needs further study. You have to pause, and we have to explore and appreciate and experience what the Torah is telling us on a deeper level. So tonight we're going to go through a portion of this week's parsha, and we're going to explore these psukim on two levels. On the guf level, which is the more practical level, the more tangible level. But then we're going to explore a different interpretation that's on a deeper level, a perspective that takes us into the neshama and that can really give us tremendous meaning and relevance. So in this week's parsha, I just have prepared some of the sources on the sheets. In this week's parsha, Parshas Teitzei, the Torah has three psukim that speak about the topic of giving the bechar, the firstborn, al pi shnayim, that when the father dies, the bechar inherits double. So the pasuk says, "Kisiya leish shtei nashim." If a man has two wives, ha'achas ahuva v'achas snua. One wife is loved and one wife is hated. The other levanim, and they give birth to children. Ha'ahuva hasnua. And the hated woman had the firstborn. Says the pasuk, and it'll be the day when the father wants to give inheritance to his child. He is unable to choose instead to give his double inheritance to the son of the loved wife. Ki es ha-bechar ben hasnua, rather, he has to give the bechar who was born to the hated wife. Yaker lasis like pishnayim. He's the one you have to give a double portion. Bechal asher yematzeh lai. Why? Ki hu reishis einai, because he is the first of your strength. Lai mishpat ha-bechara, and the bechara goes to him. So we can zoom by these three psukim. And the pasuk is telling us the halacha of a firstborn gets a double portion, and not appreciate there's much more going on over here than meets the eye. And there's a couple of simple, obvious questions, if we just pause to explore this, that seemingly don't make so much sense. Firstly, if the Torah just wants to tell us the laws of Bechar, that a Bechar gets al pi shnayim, so just say it's simple, that if a person has children, multiple sons, who gets the double portion? His first son. And even if he doesn't, for some reason, want to give it to the first son, nevertheless, he has to, because he's the bechar. So why does the Torah give this very interesting and strange almost scenario, an example of a person who has two wives, one's hated, one's loved? It seems very extreme. Secondly, if you read the first pasuk seems to also have an inconsistency. The first pasuk says, "V'yodolai vanim ha'ahuva v'hasnua." He has children from the loved one and from the snua, from the hated one. V'haya haben habechar lasnia. Who has the firstborn child? The hated one. So the words before seem to be out of order. V'yodolai vanim ha'ahuva v'hasnua. But who's the one who had the ben habechar? Lasnia. So it seems to be a little bit out of order. Additionally, if you look at the last pasuk, it doesn't make sense. The pasuk says, and you would want to give your double portion to who? To the son of the loved one. No, you can't. You know why you can't? Because he is not the bechar. Well, what was the havamina and what was the answer? Of course he's not the bechar. We knew that. Why would I think that I should be able to give it to the bechar, to the child of the loved of the loved one. He wasn't the firstborn. So when you pause for a moment and you look at these three psukim, these are some of the questions that are screaming at us that beg explanation. So to understand this, there was a story that happened in the time of the Goyim in the 1700s. There is a lot of controversy if the story even happened, but it's brought down in Merni Svarim the following story. There was a man who was in the times of the Goyim. He was married to a wife, and the shidduch didn't work out, so they ended up getting divorced. Immediately after, he remarried another lady, and she became pregnant right away. 7 months later, she gave birth to a boy, and immediately thereafter, the first wife also gave birth to a boy. And it was obvious that the son that came from the first wife, the divorced wife, was also his son. Obviously, that was a full-term baby, and she had been pregnant when they got divorced. They didn't know about it. And the second son, who was born from the second wife, was a preemie, and she gave birth after 7 months. And then this man was a wealthy man, and many years later he died, and it became a big fight. What was the fight? The fight was that he left over big Yerusha. He was a wealthy man, a lot of money. And the mother, the new wife, she said, my son gets the Yerusha, gets the double Yerusha. Why? Because my son was born first. But the first wife came and she said, no, my son should get the Yerusha. Why? Because although your son was born first, but my son was conceived first, and my son was created first. So this question came to the Gaon. And the Gaon said, this is how we understand the Gemara. These three psukim explain this. When do we look at a bechar? Is a bechar from the firstborn, or is a bechar the first to be conceived? So the Gaon says that a bechar is the first who is conceived. And he says that's how you understand it in this Pasha. A man has two wives. He has two wives. One hated, who he divorced. She was married first. And the second one, he loved and he stayed with her. What happened? And they both gave birth. Who gave birth first? The Ahuva gave birth first, because it was a preemie after 7 months. And then was the Snua. His first wife gave birth. Who's going to become the Bechar to get the Pishnayim? It's going to be the son of the first wife. Why? Says the Pasuk. Why would that be so? Why? Because he is the first of his strength. What does Reishis Einai mean? So we have this same language in Parshas Vayechi. Yaakov Avinu, when he gave the brachas to the Shvatim, and he had Ruvain, he told Ruvain, Bechari ata kaichi v'reishes aini. You are the strength. You are the first. My first strength. What does Rashi say over there? He tipa rishayna shelai. You are the first one that I inseminated and I conceived. You were the first one. So Reishis Aini means that you were the first one to conceive. So the pasuk is saying that although the second wife who's loved gave birth first, nevertheless, Bechar comes from who was conceived first. And who is that? That was the first wife, and therefore he gets the Bechar. That's how this whole, it makes sense, because the Torah doesn't just want to tell us the halacha of a Bechar, but to give us a further halacha, which is how do we judge firstborn? Which question? So, because if the Torah just wants to tell us halacha that a Bechar gets al pishnayim, so you don't have to have this whole story, right? But the Torah wants to add on and teach us a scenario where you have the same man, he married two wives, right, back to back, okay? So he divorced one and he remarried, and then it comes to tell us this halacha that the halacha bechor goes after conception and not necessarily after birth.
The bechor is for the one that he hated.
So the one who he hated was conceived first. The one who was born was to the one he loved. Nevertheless, bechor goes after conception, not after birth. So what happens by twins? Let's say you have twins, right? It's the same. Very good. So Yaakov and Esau. So you have twins. So by twins, there's two types of twins. There's identical twins. Now, by identical twins, they're both conceived exactly at the same time. And what happens is that the egg splits. After it was inseminated, the egg splits. So there's no concept of who was conceived first, right? So the question doesn't apply to identical twins. But by non-identical twins, over there it's two completely separate eggs. So over there you have a question, right? You could ask who was conceived first. However, it's impossible for us to know. At least today we have medical devices to figure it out. But certainly, years ago they didn't have that. So all practical purposes, no way to know who was conceived first. So bechor goes after whoever was born first. But like Eli said, what about Yaakov and Esau? Yaakov and Esau, were they identical twins or were they non-identical twins? So it's clear they were non-identical twins for two reasons. First of all, identical twins are identical because they come from the same egg. And we know Yaakov and Esau looked very, very, very different right away from their birth. In addition to that, there's a very interesting Rashi that says there's a concept in computer sciences, it's this concept, and it's also in management systems called FILO and LIFO and FIFO. It's an acronym. FIFO stands for first in, first out, FIFO. LIFO is last in, first out, and FILO is first in, last out. What am I talking about? We all appreciate when we go on an airplane. Okay, so every airline has a different approach to the order that they board. It goes by classes. Some airlines like Southwest go backwards to forwards. But the concept is that the first people who board the plane, let's assume that you're doing it like Southwest, which is, at least it used to be, which is that they board the end of the plane first and they work their way up. So whoever goes in first is the last to come out. That's FILO, first in, last out, and vice versa. LIFO, the last in is the first out, right? So this is a concept that's actually used in computer sciences and in management systems. So says Rashi says that in Sefer Bereshis by Yaakov and Esau, it's the same thing, because the womb is like a pipe. So when you have twins, you have two embryos. So whoever was inseminated first, conceived first, would be the last one out. And whoever was conceived second would be the first one out. FILO and LIFO. So who was the first one supposed to be coming out? Naturally, it was Esau, which means that he was the second one to be conceived, which means Yaakov Avinu was the first one to be conceived. That's what Rashi says over there in the parsha over there. So therefore, it comes out that Yaakov Avinu was conceived first. That's what Rashi over there says. So there was a very famous beautiful, excellent. So that's exactly where we're going. So there's a big paisik in the Talmud Chacham called Reb Shlomo Kluger. Reb Shlomo Kluger, just who he was born in 1785, about 250 years ago. He lived at the end of the time of the Vilna Gaon. He wrote about 160 svarim. The most famous one that we know in yeshivas is called Chachma Shleima. So he says, I will bring you a raya and a proof to the way we just learned these psukim from Yaakov and Esau. Why? He explains the question that Shmuel just had, which is, first of all, why did Yaakov, have to grab onto Esau's heel? he was the Bechar anyway, right? So the simple answer is true. He was the Bechar anyway, but no one could know. How would anyone know? How would anybody know that he was conceived first? Because he was in his mother's womb. So therefore, to be l'chol hadeyis, meaning that there should not be any machlekes or any question about it. He wanted to be 100% clear. So that's when he grabbed Esav's ankle. So he should come out first, and he should come out first. So you're asking a good question. You're asking if he came out second, then of course everyone should know. That's a very good question. That's an excellent question. It's a great question. I don't know. It's a good question. But he brings down a very interesting Medrash Rabbah. He brings a very interesting Medrash Rabbah, and with that we'll conclude this shot in the pasuk. The Medrash Rabbah says that after Esav bought the Bechor from Yaakov, he gathered together all the princes and the nobles of the area, and they sat down and they had a party, and they were laughing. They were laughing at the joke, what just happened, that he bought the Bechor. When Hashem, says the Medrash Rabbah, when Hashem saw that they were sitting around and laughing and joking, so Hashem also laughed with them. Hashem also laughed with them, and with that, he confirmed and authenticated the fact that Yaakov Avinu is the Bechar. So Shlomo Kloger says, how do you understand this Medrash? Asa sat down with them and they laughed and joked. So Hashem also laughed and joked, and that confirmed Yaakov's Bechar. What does that mean? So it explains a beautiful idea which confirms this way of learning the pasuk, which is that what did they imagine? You come home from work and you didn't eat supper. You're right. You just told me you didn't eat supper. Okay, so you're starving. So you knock on my door and you say, Zevi, I am starving. Whatever you have in your oven, just give it to me. I know you just bought. I just bought 2 buildings in real estate because you're in real estate. So I just bought in real estate 2 buildings. I'm going to give it to you, and whatever you have, I'm going to give. So it's imbalanced, right? It's just not proportionate. It doesn't make any sense. So when Esav bought the Bechor for a bowl of soup, so they were laughing. And they were saying, of course, this sale is invalid. And of course, it's not authentic. Why? Because, of course, he didn't mean it. You don't mean to really do that. The whole thing was a joke. Now, al pi halacha, that's not true. Because al pi halacha, if you go through a sale, if you sell somebody a house, and you sign a contract, and you do everything you need, it doesn't matter even if in your heart you had known forced Esav to do this. So legally, it's a good sale. So when Hashem saw that Esav was laughing because he was saying, Al pi emes, in truth, in my heart, where no one sees, I really don't mean it. So Hashem said, you think that you're the Bechor and you're selling it to Yaakov? No. Really, Yaakov is the Bechor. You know why? Because I know what happened inside your mother's stomach. I know who was impregnated first, who conceived first. You know who? It was Yaakov who was first. So Hashem laughed as well because I'm going to do the same need that you're doing. And who really was the first one to be conceived? It was Yaakov, and with that he confirmed. So this is all the beautiful shot in the pasuk that we could learn. And it has practical halachic ramifications. There's a lot more to say on this topic. There are many who argue vehemently against all this, but we're not going to, that's for a different time. So, and this is all al pi the guf and the halacha of how we could learn these psukim. The Baal HaTanya, who is Reb Shneir Zalman Liadi, he was the first Rebbe of Chabad, who was born in 1745. He comes along and he gives a deeper understanding of these psukim that's relevant to every single person. Because you can look at this pasuk and say, very nice, I'm not a Bechar, right? And Baruch Hashem, if I have a Bechar, I love him. So this pasuk is not relevant to me. And what does this pasuk have to do with me? So he says a beautiful pshat that tells us the neshama and the hidden meaning inside these words of this pasuk. We know in Shir Hashirim, we compare the relationship between Hashem and his people like a husband and a wife. And there are 2 types of people, there are two types of marriages. There's a marriage that you see this old couple, right? It's by their great grandchild's Shabbos Sheva Brachos, and these two old Elta Yidden, deep in their 80s, and they're smiling with a freshness as if it's their Shana Rishona, and they say, "We've never had a fight, we've never had an argument. I cannot remember one time in our whole marriage that he ever raised his voice at me." We've all met such people, and if you're like me or like most people, and you're listening to that, you feel your heart drop many stories, and you're like, it's not most of us. It's the same thing in our avodas Hashem, in our relationship with Hashem. There are people who everything they do, like they just do everything right. They do everything right. Nothing's a struggle. Nothing's difficult. They're always besimcha. They're always happy. They're always easygoing. They always have a positive attitude. They're always doing the right thing. And like sometimes you just want to catch them doing something wrong. Like, are you human? There are yichidim like that. They're very unique individuals. But then we have the rest of us, the rest of humanity, myself included, certainly, which are people who we're not perfect and we struggle with different things, and we have weaknesses, we have negative tendencies, and it's something that we struggle with. So that, says the Balatanya, is what the pasuk is saying. Ki siena leish, when Hashem has shtei nashim, two types of wives, achas ahuva va'achas astua. You have some people, they're the ahuva, they're the beloved wife. They're in a completely romantic state of spirituality and closeness and zvekas to Hashem constantly. And then you have people, it's Esha Snua. She's hated. Doesn't mean that Hashem hates her, but she herself feels like she's hated because she herself is constantly struggling, constantly working to try to better herself or better themselves. And things don't go as smoothly. They're not always bright and sunny. And it's possible to think that who is the Ben HaBachar? Who is the one that Hashem is going to cherish? You'd think it's the Ben Ahuva. You'd think that it's the perfect person. That's who Hashem loves. Says the Baal Tanya, beautiful. V'haya b'yayim hanchilas banav. The day Hashem wants to give his inheritance. When is that? That's going to be at the ultimate redemption, at the ultimate geula, at the ultimate revelation of Hashem's love and warmth and light to all of us. Who is going to get a double portion of godliness? Who's going to get a double portion of light? It's not going to be the Ben Ahuva. It's going to be the Ben Hasnua. It's going to be that which the hated wife, quote unquote, offered, the offspring of that person. They say that the Tzemach Tzedek, someone once came to the Tzemach Tzedek and said, "What should I do? I have no cheshek to learn." You could fill in the blanks. No cheshek to learn, no cheshek to daven, no cheshek to be nice to my wife. You could fill in the blanks. But I have no cheshek to learn. And the Tzemach Tzedek turned to him and said, "And what should I do? I do have a cheshek to learn." And what he meant to say was, the whole point is to work despite our struggle. That even though you don't want to do what's right, you still do it. That's what's cherished and that's what's special, because it's not a kunst to do it when I'm loved. The Rabbi Solomon Ruzhin, he brought a beautiful interpretation. Is a famous Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. It says, "Al toimer lekashe efne eshna." A person shouldn't say, "When I have time, then I'll learn." Why? Shem alay tipana. Maybe you won't have time. That's the literal translation. So Rabbi Solomon Ruzhin says, "Al toimer lekashe efne eshna." Don't say, "When I have time, I'll learn." Shem alay tipana. Maybe Hashem doesn't want you to have time, and He still wants you to do your best. And this is a fundamental shift in perspective. And I just recently, I was in Eretz Yisrael for the summer, and I generally consider myself a calm person, a nice person. I'm generally respectful to people. And something, a certain pattern came up for me over the weeks I was there, which is every time I encountered the Israeli attitude, I lost myself. when I encounter people who tell me what to do in a way that doesn't seem rational, in a language that I don't speak, so it kind of triggers something in me that I just lose myself. I just lose myself. And this happened at least 3 or 4 times over the trip. In cab drivers, it happened. I was waiting in line by a store. It happened with a security guard by the Kaisel, and I lost myself. And what I realized is there are two things happening here. There's the actual broken midah, if you want to call it, which was my anger, my frustration at the person. But then there was something else going on, a subplot, which is my relationship to my struggle. What is my reaction to the fact that I displayed anger and to the fact that I was not perfect? And there's these two conversations going on at the same time. And most times, I don't even look at the second under the radar conversation, which is otherwise known as shame or rejecting the fact that I am not perfect. So I have a choice. I have a choice. What do I do with the fact that I'm not perfect? What do I do with the fact that I struggle? For most people view struggle as an indication that there's something inherently wrong and fundamentally broken with me. It's unacceptable. It's a state of affairs that we cannot let it continue. And we have to do whatever we can to completely eradicate it, because weakness, negativity, brokenness, struggle, or certain patterns of behavior are absolutely unacceptable, and I have to be perfect. And what the Baal HaTanya here is saying is something very profound. Hashem doesn't want perfect people. If he wanted perfect people, he would have created me perfect. If he wanted just Isha Ahuva, that's all he would have. People who would love to learn, people who would run to daven, people who would run to do good things. But Hashem didn't want that. Hashem wanted broken people, struggling people, human people, imperfect people, working on themselves despite the fact that we're human. So the whole relationship with struggle is something that this idea begs us to explore and re-examine. So what does it mean? What does it mean to be okay with the fact that I struggle? So that means that's it. Everything's fine. Everything's good. So firstly, and I ask myself this question, when I have a tendency or I have patterns, how many times do we promise ourselves we're not going to do and fill in the blank? And it's something that I struggled with for years. 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 3 steps forward, 5 steps back, stagnation. Let me start again. And we do this year in and year out. And what ends up happening is we start to feel negative about ourselves, that we're inherently broken and we're just hopeless. So first of all, why is it okay to be okay with this? And perhaps it's very obvious, because Hashem never called me in, you in, or anybody in and asked us, what would you like your strengths to be? What would you like your weaknesses to be? Would you even like to have weaknesses in the first place? No one asked me my opinion. So whatever makeup I have and tendencies that I have is inherently designed, custom tailored, specifically for me. That's who he wants me to be. That's where he wants me to start from. But let's take it a step further. Imagine there's a family, it's a picture perfect family. They have money, they have good looks, everyone's smart, everyone does well in yeshiva and in schools, they get into the best schools, they do the best shidduchim, everything is always smiling, they drive the right cars, everything is perfect. And then, unfortunately, one day, a child is born into this family with severe handicaps and breaks the mold and breaks the image of perfection. There are 4 options and 4 ways that this family can deal with. Now, I'm not talking about the pain. I'm not talking about the emotional havoc that this creates. But on a practical level, there are 4 ways to deal with it. You can have one option where total denial, total rejection. This is not how our family is. This is not in our family vision. We cannot deal with it. We're ashamed of it, and it's total rejection. We make believe it's not there. Obviously, the child's going to suffer tremendously. It's going to be a life full of denial and rejection. The second option is begrudgingly acceptance, dragging their feet. What could we do? What could we do? We have such a child, and we need to get the child help. So we'll get the child some extra help. Maybe put in a remedial classroom, some extra tutoring. But at the end of the day, we're still resisting it. So as soon as we see a little bit of improvement, as soon as we think and we hope that the child doesn't need it anymore, we pull the plug on the help, and we expect the child to be able to function just like everybody else. What happens with that? Every time the child displays the handicap, or if the child is not performing to the level that parents want, what's going to happen is there's going to be frustration. There's going to be anger. You have another option, which is total acceptance, complete and absolute acceptance. This is what Hashem wanted. This is how Hashem made the child. And we're fine. We have no expectations of the child. The child does not need to go to school. The child does not need to do anything because Nebuch, the child is completely and absolutely handicapped. What's going to happen is the child's going to be the same their entire life. They're never going to grow. But there's a 4th option, which is a very difficult option because it's straddling two worlds and it's walking a tightrope. It's on the one hand, having an attitude of total and absolute acceptance. There's nothing wrong with the child. This child is custom made for our family, and we accept that. We're not ashamed. We don't reject, and we don't ask, why can't you be like your brother? And why don't you? I already gave you 3 years of tutoring. Why can't you get it already? What will become of you? None of that, because we completely have our eyes wide open. But at the same time, we believe in the child. We believe that with the right help, the child can grow. The child is not serving a life sentence that he is destined to stay stagnant. We accept you for who you are with our eyes wide open, our feet in reality, but at the same time, we believe in your ability to grow, transform, transcend. And that is what the message of the Baal Tanya is telling us over here. That all of the rest of the world who are Isha Hasnua, we have many days that we feel distant from Hashem and we feel what's going to be with me, or why do I have these thoughts, or why do I have this challenge, or why do I have this tendency? So we have those 4 choices. We could completely deny it and make believe like we're perfect people, but reality always has a way of catching up. We could begrudgingly, I just had this yesterday, someone called me, he wanted to talk over something, and he struggles with some weakness that he has, and he decided he's going to work on it. And he called me yesterday that for 2 weeks he felt improvement, but then after 2 weeks it was as if nothing happened, and he completely reverted back to his old behavior. He was calling to discuss it. So first of all, I told him that he was able to accomplish 2 weeks. That in itself is a tremendous accomplishment. But my response to him was, this is exactly the whole point. The point is to struggle. The point is that despite the fact that we will revert back to our tendencies, to keep on believing in our ability to transcend, and it's not a one-time thing. So says the Baal HaTanya that the people who, despite their struggle, despite their weaknesses, despite the things about themselves that they're not proud of, they accept it. And not out of guilt, not out of shame, not out of rejection. They still produce a ben. They still produce something to say, God, this is what I have to offer you. This is the best I can because I believe in the ability that you gave my soul, my neshama, to grow, to transcend, and to expand, and to go beyond the limitations. So then Hashem says, on such a person, I'm going to lases like pishnayim. I'm going to give you double love, double strength, double giloy and revelation of Hashem. And may we all go through our lives and embrace our struggle. It's not an indication or a siman or a raya that we're bad and broken. There's nothing wrong with being human. It's exactly how Hashem wants us to be. So we can embrace that. And thank you very much and have a good Shabbos.